And welcome to the Daily Space Weather, folks. We're streaming this one live to Twitch, and we're starting things out looking at the local yellow dwarf, otherwise known as the Sun, in 131 angstroms. And we see a coronal mass ejection kicking off, which is taking its good old time. We'll get into it momentarily, and I be your host, El smAsho del Masho Tank, once again broadcasting from the Smash Bunker. If you hear that rumbling sound in the background, that is the sound of the Smash Bunker. Its location is classified. And hey, none of that, none of that. Alright, that's better. Let's look at some more stuff here. Again, we are streaming live to Twitch, and if you're viewing live on Twitch, why don't you leave us a comment? We could respond to it in real time, and you'll affect the way the space weather video comes out today. Here's where stuff is in the solar system. There's where it'll be in a week. And we're going to be viewing the Sun from stereo A, which is out around this area, looking at the Sun in this direction. And we see a coronal mass ejection kicking off roughly in this direction, which is likely where you're viewing from. Please leave a comment if you're viewing from a different universe, time, galaxy, multiverse, etc. Here's the view from stereo A, and we can see that coronal mass ejection. We've covered it the last 2 days. We even did an extra video yesterday afternoon trying to catch the moment of release, and it's not fully released yet from the corona, but as you can see, it is going to be a coronal mass ejection. If I had to guess, I would guess that this one is going to miss the Earth to the west, and how I come to that conclusion, I'm not going to get into it. Now, we have a deceptive situation going on here, and you can see the Earth is out in this region from stereo A's perspective. So we see this coronal mass ejection here, which is fully released by now, it looks like. Yeah, that is fully released now. And we're seeing a halo on the SOHO coronagraph 2 and the SOHO coronagraph 3. Now that looks like an Earth-facing coronal mass ejection, but it's not. That's actually coming out of the far side, because the Earth-facing one has not yet propagated out of the corona. So there you can see that. That's going to be releasing today. And if you want to watch it yourself, head to the Integrated Space Weather Analysis Center. And Stereo A Core 2 Space Weather Beacon is on page 7 of the default tab, which is the Solar tab. So there's the view from SOHO. This is in between Earth and Sun now. The SOHO spacecraft, kind of the predecessor to the SDO, the Solar Dynamics Observatory. And here's the view from the C3, the zoomed out coronagraph. And you can see it looks like a halo. That would be an indication of a coronal mass ejection facing toward the Earth. But the one that is facing toward the Earth isn't yet propagated. So we're seeing the coronal mass ejection propagate out into the solar system on the opposite side of the Earth right now. Again, this one is not fully released. And what you're seeing in those coronagraphs is this coronal mass ejection, not this one. All right, let's move on here. Looking at HelioViewer. And I think I've messed with the sizing here. Let me just get this correct again. There we go. There's the 171 angstroms view. There's the magnetogram, and we don't see very much magnetic organization at all. And there's the 304 angstroms view. And we made some custom movies here. Here's a full disc, 304 angstroms. And the reason that we did this is because we're checking to see if we see any things like limb darkening. I'm expecting to see some limb darkening today. We even saw a big decrease in the 10.7 centimeter radial flux in the past 2 days. And actually in the past 1 day. It's all the way down to 68. Anyway, there's the image of 304 angstroms, complete with the time and date stamps. And here's the 171 angstroms view. And it is very difficult to see when you're looking at a bright object like this. There's no real 3D perspective here, and you can't really see anything going on yet. It may take until it entirely releases to see some limb darkening. And if you're viewing the content on YouTube, thanks for tuning in. please take a moment to press like and subscribe, and perhaps visit our links, which are right there, and perhaps help support the channel and increase the probability that we'll keep making these videos publicly viewable and as timely as they've been, as we have hundreds and hundreds of daily space weather videos. We may even be in the thousands now, and I think we're probably pushing 700 or so. And there's some other content there too. And also, thanks to our BitChute subscribers. And we've uploaded our cosmology segment early release on Patreon and Subscribestar. All of our Patreon and Subscribestar posts are free for the entire month of April to try to get some additional fundraising happening there. And thanks for everybody who's contributing and viewing on BitChute, as we see wild success over there. And our video that we released on March 19th about hydroxychloroquine is now our top video on BitChute. So thanks everybody for tuning in. We hope Mark Zuckerberg feels better. We're also on Instagram, and it's got more levity and more stuff that's not so serious. We're also on Facebook. Check us out there, perhaps if you're a Facebook person. We're on Twitter. We're on Gab. So please share our content in all of these locations. And we greatly appreciate all of your interactions. So thanks for reminding the content psychowits. We appreciate that. This is Minds.com, the future of social media. Unlike Facebook, it will not shadow ban you, throttle your content, and do all sorts of unsavory things because of your political views. Next, we're going to look at the sun in 94 angstroms. And we're just viewing a bunch of different wavelengths today to see if we can see any indication of that coronal mass ejection. And the 94 angstrom view does take more images per minute than all the other scopes except the 131 angstrom. So those are specifically formulated to watch solar flares, X-ray flares. And let's move on. KP index is at 2. And the 10.7 centimeter radial flux, again, has dropped down to 68 solar flux units. And that is likely because of the coronal mass ejection. Because all that plasma in between the sun and the Earth are going to affect the propagation of the radio signal. Once the coronal mass ejection is ejected, 10.7 centimeter radial flux will probably go back up to 70 or 71 promptly. So again, there's where stuff is in the solar system. There's where it'll be in a week. Approaching a new moon, which is my favorite phase of the moon, as it helps us to sleep. Here's where stuff is above my head. We see the moon, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars all piling up there on the eastern portion of the ecliptic. If you've got a low horizon, go check that out. It should be epic on the daily. X-ray flux, quite flatlined there, no real surprise, and a great example of how we don't need anything resembling a solar flare to see a coronal mass ejection. And this one's taken its good old time, but keep in mind, folks, these things can suddenly accelerate out of the corona, and it's because of the electron flux, and we'll get into it in a minute, actually, as there is a cosmology segment in today's video. Proton flux, not surprisingly, quite flatlined. And a thing like a coronal mass ejection striking the magnetosphere could cause this to rise. Next, we're going to look at solar wind data. And the phi angle is currently around 300 degrees. Very low solar wind density at less than 2 protons per cubic centimeter. And we see a ramping down of the solar wind speed as well, down to 380 kilometers a second. Here's the data from ACE. There's the latest update. And it looks like the particle detector is messed up on ACE. Hopefully it's not some sort of irreparable hardware damage. And let's move on to the magnetosphere movie. And there's the magnetosphere. Now keep in mind, this is the space weather modeling framework, a much better magnetosphere model than the ISWA model, as this has higher resolution, different data points, and better math. There is no backside magnetic pressure wave happening. And if Nibiru were out there, folks, if Nibiru were out there, people with backyard telescopes would see it through simple occultation. People with backyard telescopes discover asteroids all the time, because when you're looking at a star and something gets in the way and you have a sophisticated enough telescope, you can track that object. Here's the ground magnetic perturbations. So for all of you hoping Nibiru comes and ends all life on Earth, sorry, it's just not there. Sorry to rain on your propagandistic parade. Here is the ground magnetic perturbations here, and we see the South Pole clearly in the southern Indian Ocean there, as opposed to on the Antarctic continent. And we see perturbations over both the Siberian and the Canadian North Pole. If you're wondering, there are two North Poles during this geomagnetic excursion. Next, looking at the GOES magnetometer, we see continued spikiness and fairly low readings here. And this is going to continue for the foreseeable future. Next, we'll look at the GONG 2 top view ecliptic plane field plot, one of the most important aspects of solar forecasting that there is. This data is based on 51 ground magnetometers, as well as one on stereo A, which is over here, and stereo B, which is over here. Keep in mind the magnetic environment can change at any moment. The current sheet is currently charged entirely by the South Pole solar polar field, shown here in red. That's South Pole polarity. Top view ecliptic plane field plot doesn't really show us anything too exciting here. Keep in mind the magnetic environment can change with absolutely no warning. Next, looking at the relativistic electrons, the greater than 2 mega electron volt fluence is quite low. So we're expecting to see GPSs working very well and not a lot of risk of satellite charging. GOES electron flux is cratered as we forecasted, rather. And we're expecting to see that at very low levels, at least for the next 24 hours. Ionosphere is quite charge-discharge disparitied here, and I'll show you on the latest image after this plays through once. I'll break out the epic pen. It's epic, that pen. Alright, actually it's pretty normalized now, but when you see a 14 megahertz charge up here over the eastern Pacific Ocean, I should say western Pacific Ocean, when you see a big 14 megahertz blob out here, and then you see a huge blob of red here indicating an F layer and no F2 layer, that's an indication that there's a huge charge disparity, but that has equalized. That latest image, 8:30 Universal Time. Next, we'll look at windy.com's pressure maps. Let's bring that back. Here's the GFS forecast for pressure cells. And we always let this advance one day into the future, so wherever you are on the planet, even if you're on a different planet, you'll know where pressure cells are likely to be. There's 1300 Eastern Daylight Time tomorrow. And let's move on to the cosmology segment, as cosmology is increasingly interesting as we make more and more better ideas come to fruition when it comes to this stuff, as we prefer to understand the distinction between our you-know-what and a hole in the ground, a massive radio source in space, or a quasar, or perhaps a BE star. You know what a BE star is? Well, we'll get to it. First, we're going to talk about new research explaining why the solar wind is hotter than expected, and it has to do with electrons and protons reacting in clouds of plasma in space. It's not because there's a Birkeland current in between the Earth and the Sun. You know how I know that? Because I'm not dead right now. If there was a Birkeland current connecting things like planets and stars, there would be a constant electron exchange going on in between them, and you would be dead, 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 dead. Anyway, the solar wind in this model has to do with electrons and the way that they interact with protons, as most of the solar wind is made of protons, just like cosmic rays. So perhaps read this article. It's on phys.org in the Astronomy and Space section. Next, let's talk about BE stars. Now, what are BE stars, you ask? Well, those are stars that have special types of emission lines. The emission spectra from Balmer stars are the Balmer series, which are a series of hydrogen emission spectra. and it's I believe it's 6 different spectral lines there, I think it is. And so BE stars are stars about the Balmer series emissions. They have those very specific hydrogen emission lines. And so we've got an article here about X-ray binaries. And this particular X-ray binary is a Balmer series X-ray binary. So here's an article about X-ray pulsations. This is the strongest X-ray emission ever from the, I believe it's a Large Magellanic Cloud. Hold on a minute. Anyway, we see a large transient out of BE X-ray binary with the catchy title of RxJ0209.6-7427. So, yeah, Balmer X-ray binaries are a subclass of high-mass X-ray binaries in which the optical star is a dwarf, subgiant, or giant OBE star. So spectral class O, Balmer series star. Studying X-ray outbursts could be essential to improve our understanding of X-ray binaries. For those of you who've been watching the channel a long time, you know that I'm very interested in a specific X-ray binary, and we're going to look at its transients in a moment. Perhaps read that article, if you haven't yet, about a new transient outburst. And this was discovered in November of 2019, I believe, is when the emission happened. I'll just scroll down. You can pause the video if you like. The outburst started on November 20th. The astronomers noted that despite the super Eddington luminosity of RxJ0209.6-7427, the massive radio source, which they refer to as a neutron star in the system, appears to have only a moderate magnetic field strength. The researchers found the surface magnetic field of the neutron star, otherwise known as a massive radio source, is at a level of approximately 3 trillion G, and its orbital period is likely greater than 50 days. Let's look at some transients. First, we're going to look at Sagittarius A star. If you're wondering what that is, it's the core of the Milky Way galaxy. And we don't see very significant emissions from Sagittarius A star because there is a lot of gas and dust in between you and it. So there is the last couple of weeks of Sagittarius A star's output. Here are the last few years of Sagittarius A star's output. And note that it is actually ramping up a little bit here over the past, what's that, 15 years. Next, we're going to look at the Crab pulsar, which is the most significant X-ray source in the entire sky, the Crab pulsar. It's so consistent of an X-ray source that we use it to calibrate X-ray telescopes. There is the Crab pulsar's data. And nothing to write home about there. It's right around its standard range there, around 0.2 counts. I'm not going to get into the units of that because that is one hell of a unit. Next, we're going to look at the Vela pulsar, which is kind of opposite the Cygnus arm of the galaxy. It's out to the right if you're looking at the galactic core, and Cygnus is to the left. Vela pulsar and Crab pulsar would be out to the right. There are the transients from Vela pulsar, a very famous pulsar, and a very cool pulsar. And nothing too exciting happening there. Let's look at 3C405. Oh, what happened? Let's look at Cygnus A. Cygnus A, known as 3C space 405.0. This is the strongest radio source in the sky. And we actually did see some very significant X-ray outbursts from it. Check it out. This one here is about 7. That's 0.07. So off the scale. And this one here is at 0.10, which is well off the scale. So we just saw some big time outbursts from Cygnus A, massive radio galaxy, featured on smashomash.com/forum. And we'll be actually making a t-shirt featuring Cygnus A. And let's look up one more thing. I'll bet you can probably guess what it is if you've watched the channel a long time. It's Cygnus X3, otherwise known as Deneb, the massive X-ray binary in the galaxy. One which is basically like a miniature blazar, where the jet out of the massive radio source, which is orbiting the massive Wolf-Rayet star, which has a solar wind speed and velocity, solar wind velocity and stellar wind density about 10 times of the sun. And it's so big that if it was in our solar system, it would be approximately the size of Mars's orbit in terms of its diameter. And we see this rising out of its quiescent state here, and it looks like it's pretty consistently risen now. So you can see here's 0.04, and here's 0.04. So it's kind of in the nominal part of its range now, and we wouldn't be surprised to see this go into a high outburst mode. That's typically what it does, as you can see the graph. And it just came off of its quiescent state. We've been watching it, and we're trying to get some radio astronomers and other folks to study this object, as it's one of the only known point sources for cosmic ray flux. Let's move on to earthquakes. And we see a big uptick in earthquakes. In fact, one came in while I was doing show prep, folks. Check it out. A 6.0 at Honduras. That is not good. Let's take a quick look. Happening just off the coast. And let's see if tsunami.gov has anything to say about it. Well, the good news is no tsunami warning, advisory, watch, or threat currently in effect. So that was originally reported as a 6.3, already downgraded by the U.S. Geologic Survey. So no current warnings for tsunamis going on. And that's the biggest quake we've seen in the past significant period of time. Probably about, what, a week, 10 days since we saw a 6 magnitude. And let's scroll up the list, as there is a big uptick in earthquakes all around the world. I'm not going to call out them all, but if we see deep ones, ultra shallow ones that are above sea level, or ones in really, really odd places, we will report. Here's another deep quake at Afghanistan. That one's nearly at 100 kilometers depth at a 4.3 magnitude. Here's a deep one at New Zealand. I don't know why they're saying that's at New Zealand. It's no. Oh, okay, it isn't. No. Let's actually take a look at that one. It's at a quite deep depth there, 164.2 kilometers. And yes, if you're wondering, I'm touching my face. Look, folks, I'm touching my face. And you know what? I'll touch my face as much as I feel like. And if you've got beef, just leave a comment, and I'll make a video about me putting lotion on my face. It puts a lotion on its face. It puts a lotion on its face. Maybe I'll retire and start selling hand lotion. What do you think? Just scrolling up the list, here's another deep one at Vanuatu. That one is at 196 kilometers and a 4.9 magnitude. I would say if you're in earthquake-prone zone, folks, I would say have an earthquake plan. Know which buildings may crumble if you exit yours. If you can't afford to create a bug-out bag, knowing which buildings might fall down is preparation in itself. Let's go on to volcanoes. Well, we're talking about natural disasters. Mount Aso is producing a 6,000-foot plume. Kuchinarabu-jima is producing a 3,000-foot plume. Semeru's flight level 13,000 there. Flight level 7,000 as Tokono explodes. Popocatépetl explodes also. 19,000-foot plume there. Sangay. Constant ash emissions, which reached 21,000 feet. I think that's an uptick there, as well as lava flows on the southeastern flank, which remain active down there in Ecuador. Revenador, also in Ecuador, exploding, producing a 16,000-foot plume of ash. Sabancaya exploding, producing a 23,000-foot plume of ash. Please do not fly your John Denver-style ultralight over Sabancaya, or you might end up like John Denver. Let's talk propaganda. Oh yeah, propaganda. Hi. Propaganda. It's information that's primarily used to influence an audience and further an agenda, which may not be objective. Have you been online and seeing some non-objective information? Have you noticed a little bit of, cherry-picked data from everybody from news sources to governments to companies who are all trying to avoid litigation so they don't get sued over COVID-19, coronavirus, and the ridiculous human response and inability to understand the first thing about human health, virology, the facts, and the study of infectious diseases? Propaganda. It's at an all-time high right now, and if you thought climate change propaganda was nonsense, well, keep reading, because it's still coming out on the daily as everybody tries to cherry-pick data about COVID-19. And they've found that they can prove whatever the hell they want to about COVID-19 by taking a little piece of the data, reporting it in a completely unethical fashion, and causing me to say this: while the pen is mightier than the sword, thou shouldst carry both. And on that note, the hell out of here. So anyway, welcome to the Neo-Renaissance, folks. If you haven't headed to smashomash.org yet, check it out. We got links, including to the forum. And if you haven't checked out the forum, we've got a 23-plus long page section about coronavirus. We started covering it every day on January 23rd, and I've only missed 1 or 2 days of putting an update in the thread. So perhaps set yourself up a login if you'd like to contribute. One of the most important articles coming out is how a U.S. lab has just launched an antibody test. Yes. The only test that I'm interested in anyway of getting is the antibody test, as I'm pretty sure I've already had COVID-19. I won't get into it, but not scared of it. Not scared of people coughing on me. Not scared of licking shopping cart handles. Although, on that note, I don't lick shopping cart handles. And I have changed my shopping procedure in 0 ways. So all I do when I go to the grocery store is I go to the grocery store. Once I start touching things like shopping carts and products on shelves, I consider myself contaminated. And then when I come home, after I'm done putting the groceries away, I wash my hands. That's it. That's the same procedure I've always done, and the same kind of procedure that exposes COVIDiots for what they are. Please leave a comment if somebody's told you in the past 2 or 3 months that they've just learned how to wash their hands. I know, that was all over the news a couple of months ago. Please leave a comment and tell us your COVIDiot stories. In fact, we even have an insanity files section in the General Science Forum at smashomash.com/forum, so perhaps check that out. Let's talk about the Swiss propaganda research. Well, they're reporting some very interesting facts. Now, those of you who view me on Facebook, you may have noticed that just a few days ago I was saying that the mortality rate for this is going to end up being 0.05 to 0.09% mortality rate. Why? Because most people who get COVID-19 experience 0 symptoms or symptoms so mild that they'll have no idea that they had it in the first place, which is why testing is totally irrelevant, as the disease is highly communicable, just not particularly deadly. So if you go back to page 1 at smashomash.com/forum section on coronavirus, you'll notice the first thing I said is the virus dangerous? And the answer is not particularly for healthy people. Cardiovascular disease and cancer are and will remain the leading cause of death in developed countries. So for all the COVIDiots out there who are now very concerned about cancer and their cardiovascular health and not about coronavirus, that's the definition of being a COVIDiot. So, yeah. And by the way, COVIDiots is going to be the word of the year. So I don't know if you've been able to read any of the stuff that I've left on the screen here while I said this, but there's a lot of interesting information coming out of the Swiss propaganda research. It's swprs.org. That's swprs.org. Go read it. We regularly put posts from there in here as this Swiss doctor is going all around the world and getting information about whether or not you need elderberry wine or whether or not you need 8,000 rolls of toilet paper. Perhaps build a whole new shed just to store toilet paper, COVIDiots. For God's sakes, stop being COVIDiots. Let's just scroll down here and show you the other updates that we've put up today, as our spaced out viewers like the value-added services, it seems. So anyway, as I've been forecasting the whole time, watch the mortality rate drop and drop and drop and drop at the same time as Pennsylvania order directs businesses to require employees and customers to wear masks. So I'm very, very delighted about having to wear a mask and dress as a ninja everywhere I go and do other utterly ineffective things to battle the coronavirus, which is complete nonsense. It doesn't need to be battled. Your shitty health is what needs to be battled, because if you're in good health, you're not really in danger in the first place. Shout out to Brad. Let's do a call about this. My pal Brad, who's a musician, knows a lot about cardiovascular health, which is why we've been inviting him on. Also, Jen Bernard Reed, we'd like to get you on as well, as you've got some interesting insight, I'm sure, as well. So, Pennsylvania now requiring everybody to wear masks, and so, yeah, bravo, bravo. Now everybody on the FBI's most wanted list who's afraid to go into a Walmart can now walk into a Walmart, because now they're required to dress as a ninja. If you're a convenience store employee or you work any place where the public just is able to walk into where you're located, leave a comment if you like seeing everybody dressed as a ninja, as I don't like everybody being dressed as a ninja, and I don't like Governor Tom Wolf. Now, I'm not sure if Tom Wolf's middle name is Sucks the Dick of a, but if his middle name is Sucks the Dick of a, then Tom sucks the dick of a wolf. And I don't know if that's some kind of a satanic ritual, but not a fan, not a fan. Can't wait until the next election. Hopefully he's up for losing that election. Democrat Tom Wolf. Yes. Well, he's getting some kickback, and I don't know how many lawsuits he's going to have against him, but I would rather have my job than his. Dear Tom Wolf, shove it. You have no idea what you're doing, and you are a dum-dum. Passed by the Senate, SB 613 would require Wolf's office to align state policy with federal guidelines in determining which business will be allowed to reopen, as if the government should have anything to do with allowing or disallowing businesses to open. Now, shout out to Diamond. Yesterday he was ranting about the WHO and its never-ending list of errors. We also included an article about that from Zero Hedge, about how much of a failure the WHO is, and thanks President Trump for cutting funding, because the WHO is one of the propaganda purveyors. So you can shove at Tom Wolf and you can shove at WHO. I recognize your authority as not existing. Let's talk about the SMASH mission. It's to assist, study, and report on the ongoing formation of a unified theory of physics, which is why I prefer to, not talk about that. It's also to raise the awareness of the general public of the relationship between space weather and Earth effects. All your weather comes from space, more or less. It's also to connect and consult with media organizations to multiply our reach, which is why we make these videos. It's to demonstrate cutting-edge proof-of-concept solutions to problems like growing tomatoes indoors, growing Jerusalem artichokes outdoors, and understanding the physics of things. To publish scientific papers in a multidisciplinary manner, including but not limited to sciences such as, wellness, longevity, health, biology, COVIDiots, to assist mankind by advancing the study of predictive phenomenon in order to optimize value, reduce risk and liability, save lives and resources, and adapt no matter what the adversity is. Whether the adversity is COVIDiots or it's a coronal mass ejection that knocks out all the power on the whole planet, or if it's a comet strike. Your ancestors survived stuff like that. You probably can too. Don't be so freaked out, folks. It's all in good fun. Lastly, our mission includes wording about not being ossified in our beliefs. If you're ossified in your beliefs and unable to be agile enough to adapt to new science, you're not doing science, you're doing dogma. So if you're ossified in your beliefs, either get unossified or get the hell out of science. But even if you refuse, we'll still treat you with love, respect, and inclusion to the scientific discussion, because these videos come out of a place of love, just like, well, some of the music does too. Some of the music comes out of a place of love, neutrality, hate, and other various emotions. So check us out on SoundCloud, if you like. There's a bunch of original stuff there, including from Dr. Sam Afif, otherwise known as RABN. See? Here's chocolate cake. Here's a teaser. That's a low-fi version. I apologize. We've got newer and more produced tracks also available for you at soundclick.com/goldencapproductions. That's my record label since about 2000, the year 2000 that is. And we're trying to get Dr. Steelshank here, which is the 11th track we have, into the top 10 in the instrumental rock subgenre. So if you want to listen to some original music, go listen to this track. If it gets into the top 10, we will release it free for everybody on Patreon and Subscribestar, as all of our posts for the entire month of April are entirely public. Here's a clip. Soundclick.com/goldencapproductions. Next, we're looking back at some more data here. Here is planet Earth. And we're looking at the jet streams of the eastern world. There are the eastern jets. Here are the western jets. Here are the water vapor maps for Europe and Africa. Here are the water vapor maps for the Far East and Oceania. Here's a lightning map. It's lightningmaps.org. Next time you hear thunder, check it out. It looks like we've got some lightning striking here. Nope, maybe not. Anyway, there's the world lightning map. We've got some on the west coast of Africa. Here's the U.S. Doppler radar map. There are the time and date stamps. And it looks like it might be raining on me, and I might even see some snow today. April 16th, there's still snow falling in Pennsylvania, as well as heavy snow in places like Colorado, Wyoming, Iowa. Shout out to Iowans! Aubrey et al. Here's a water vapor map. And we see this long string of dry mass of air here, causing a bit of a deflection of the jet stream as the jet stream goes like this, pulling some cold air down here into Pennsylvania. And I like the cold air. I want to see another big snowstorm yet. I don't really care if it's... I don't care if we get 12 inches of snow. Bring it on. I did forecast a 10-inch plus snowstorm in April at some point, and I'm not entirely sure that it won't happen yet. Although I don't look at extended weather forecasts, because if it's more than about 2 days, it's probably wrong. And hey, Smash team, thanks for tuning in. We've got bonus features. And thanks for leaving some comments. Be stoic. Holla! This video was entitled Daily Space Weather, Coronal Mass Ejection, Coronavirus, Covid19, Propaganda! Here are some bonus features. And again, Patreon, all the posts are free for the entire month. So we do put up public posts anyway, even when everything is not public. So perhaps follow us on patreon.com/smashomash. You may see things you would otherwise not be able to see on the internet, as well as at Subscribestar. So for instance, yesterday we put up, was it yesterday? 2 days ago. We put up an alarm tone. Here's a teaser.
The world has been very anxious to hear from you for the last 8 hours. Shall I inform the news agencies you're about to rise, sir?
We'll be continuing to put up you know, interesting MP3s and original music and stuff like that all through April, as well as early release graphics and all that sort of stuff. We're showing you the intensity gram here to show you that there are 0 sunspots, which would be evidenced by dark regions known as umbrae. Here is the magnetogram, and we don't really see any magnetic organization except this small region right here. If you want to keep an eye on something, the pun's intentional, keep an eye on that area. And last but not least, let's look at 193 angstroms here before we call it a day, and I can vanish and then reappear. You like that? Anyway, there's a 193 angstroms view. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, stare at the sun. Don't drink it. If you do, don't drive. For God's sakes, don't drink and drive. Don't be a COVID-idiot who goes around making martinis in his car and driving around and hanging out in Walmart parking lots, jerking off, looking at little girls in masks. And since it'll never be now again, welcome to the neo-renaissance. Don't be a COVID-idiot, and may the solar wind be at your back, the UV light inoculating your life, and the atherosclerosis absent from your arteries, and the cardiovascular disease absent from your health profile.